Hi, it's Wednesday, October 29th, and I have an article that I wrote a few months ago that I thought I should put into. I'll create a video of it. I'll read through it, and you can see the article. I posted it on my website, but I'll be reposting it on my Substack, and it's called Nihilism: The Roots of Historical Denial. Nihilism is a very negative attitude towards the world where nothing matters, and it's kind of the opposite of a positive vision. Let's put it that way. So I start off, and I I start with a couple of clips from the movie The Matrix, and it starts off with Agent Smith, who is, he was like an exemplar of nihilism. And he said, billions of people just living out their lives oblivious. And I'll post the clip. And then the next thing is where Neo is he's this computer geek who's living in an apartment. He lives alone. It's pretty, his life looks pretty dismal. He's like, a wage slave basically. And his boss, he shows up to work late, and his boss is really angry with him. He's going to fire him, and but he hooks up with this guy named Morpheus, who is trying to save the people from the matrix that they're living in. So. I'll basically, Morpheus says to him, you're living in a matrix, you're living in a computer-created world, and you don't even know you're in it. And Neo says, no, I don't believe it. I don't want to believe it. No. And he's in complete denial about it. And it goes on to, the clip goes on to say that the Matrix was created by this individual, and he thought he could make something good out of it, but it turned bad. And now Morpheus is kind of a leader of some rebels who were freed from the Matrix, and he thinks, Morpheus thinks that Neo is the guy who can lead them out of the Matrix. That's the basis of the movie. But when Neo first hears the problem that he's actually in a controlled environment, he's totally controlled, he doesn't want to believe it. And that's pretty much how we are here in our modern society. That's why I talk about it. So I'm going to read the text here, and I say, I was staying at a resort in 2022 and had a short discussion with an Israeli regarding the pursuit of truth. He said that he preferred ignorance because he wants to be happy and truth is painful. 2 years later, after experiencing ethnic cleansing, constant attacks, blockading food and essential supplies, Palestinian militants broke out of what had been called the world's largest open-air prison, Gaza. It attacked Israeli military bases and settlements that are both civilian and military, and about 1,200 people were killed, and several hundred hostages were taken. The Palestinians demanded that they be exchanged for thousands of Palestinians, many of whom are minors, who've been in prison for many years. We also learned through the investigative journalists at Gray Zone that the Israeli military itself attacked its own people in its confusion, or even worse, to prevent them from being taken as hostages. The Israelis say the attack was unprovoked and unjustified. However, international law says that occupied people have the right to resist their oppressors. One way to determine reality is to go back to original sources. This is a key method that I use when people say, oh, who can understand? We don't understand. You go back to the original source, you can find out what the real fact of the matter is. So Israel, the basic issue is that Israeli society is deeply fragmented. Many soldiers have been killed out of guilt for their own behavior, and of course it's even worse for the Palestinians. All these consequences result because 90% of Israelis refuse to face the painful truth about the founding of Israel. But the truth has been spelled out quite clearly in Einstein's 1948 letter to the New York Times, co-signed by 28 prominent Jews, and yet Zionists insist that they speak for all Jews, which is another lie. This is willful, not just avoidance, but rejection of both historical and present-day reality. That's what I'm talking about here. And there's an article that I have a link to from Global Research, and I'm quoting from that briefly. Of relevance to recent developments in Israel, we bring to the attention of our readers the following letter by Albert Einstein and others to the New York Times, published on December 4th, 1948. It is of utmost significance to reflect upon a historical process initiated at the very outset of the State of Israel. What is outlined in this letter depicts the atrocities committed against the people of Palestine in 1948 in the village of Deir Yassin, which vividly describe what is currently going on more than 75 years later in the State of Israel. The article continues. Nobel Prize winner Harold Pinter speaks. Here are two quotes from his iconic acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize. Harold Pinter was a great playwright. He says, "The majority of politicians, on the evidence available to us, are interested not in truth, but in power, and in the maintenance of that power. To maintain that power, it is essential that people remain in ignorance, that they live in ignorance of the truth, even the truth of their own lives. What surrounds us, therefore, is a vast tapestry of lies upon which we feed," called a matrix, perhaps, but he's talking about here and now. And here Pinter points directly at the problem of historical denial about U.S. foreign policy. The United States supported and in many cases engendered every right-wing military dictatorship in the world after the end of the Second World War. I refer to Indonesia, Greece, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, Haiti, Turkey, the Philippines, Guatemala, El Salvador, and of course Chile. The horror the United States inflicted upon Chile in 1973 can never be purged and can never be forgiven. Hundreds of thousands of deaths took place throughout these countries. Did they take place? Are they in all cases attributable to U.S. foreign policies? The answer is yes, they did take place, and they are attributable to American foreign policy, but you wouldn't know it. It never happened. Nothing ever happened. Even while it was happening, it wasn't happening. It didn't matter. It was no interest. The crimes of the United States have been systematic, constant, vicious, remorseless, but very few people have actually talked about them. You have to hand it to America. It has exercised a quite clinical manipulation of power worldwide while masquerading as a force for universal good. It's a brilliant, even witty, highly successful act of hypnosis. Next section is about conspiracy theory as rationalization. Another example of this avoidance is the notion of conspiracy theory. One of the biggest functions of mass media in manufacturing consent, this is a book written by Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman, is the use of a government-concocted narrative foisted on the public as what really happened. The problem that the powers that be face is that some of their pesky citizens question the narrative. They notice anomalies and contradictions to the official story. One of the most famous is the magic bullet theory, which took the life of President John F. Kennedy. This bullet took various turns in trajectory. Along with it is the narrative of the quote-unquote lone gunman. A conspiracy implies more than one person involved in a crime. Subsequent investigation proved that 8 bullets were fired from different directions. So the Warren Commission report on the JFK assassination was carefully examined, and it became obvious that it was a cover-up. The idea appeared that those who questioned the official narrative were engaged in quote-unquote conspiracy theories. But who came up with the idea of the term conspiracy theory? It was none other than the CIA, who has been deeply implicated in JFK's death. Indeed, Allen Dulles, the CIA director, was fired by Kennedy for the disastrous Bay of Pigs fiasco. And yet, who did the Warren Commission put in charge of vetting evidence? Allen Dulles. It's like asking a bank robber to investigate a robbery. And it's the CIA who tells you not to consider an obvious conflict of interest in the investigation right in front of your nose. It's all a conspiracy theory. In 2013, Professor Lance DeHaven Smith, in a peer-reviewed book published by the University of Texas Press, showed that the term conspiracy theory was developed by the CIA as a means of undercutting critics of the Warren Commission's report that President Kennedy was killed by Oswald. The use of this term was heavily promoted in the media by the CIA, and I've got a link to that book in the text. It is ironic that the American, quote-unquote, American left is a major enforcer of the CIA's strategy to shut up skeptics by branding them as conspiracy theorists. The reason why the majority of people believe some form of the official story is because it has been a long-term project of manufacturing consent. And there's a link to Noam Chomsky, who is the author of that book. So the next thing is nihilistic thinking as a psychological defense against objective facts and truth. So how do people manage to keep their sanity, which is in fact insanity posing as normal? Let me repeat that. How do people manage to keep their sanity, which is in fact insanity posing as normal? The people who maintain narrative control use cynical methods to prevent people from facing reality. For example, President Obama, when faced with former crimes committed by the United States, said something to the effect that, well, what's past is past, let's just forget it and move on. Imagine a convicted killer saying to the judge, sure, I killed them, but let's move on. In fact, I will note parenthetically that Obama, at one point in a news conference, said, I'm pretty good at killing, because he was using drones to kill, people going to wedding parties, basically. He said, oh, it doesn't matter, let's just move on. Another technique is to introduce a number of conflicting conspiracy theories which confuse and exhaust people's ability to think critically. So before the first Iraq War, a PR firm got a young woman to testify that Saddam's soldiers threw babies out of the incubators to let them die on the cold floor, or Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, which turned out didn't exist. This is an example of the highly successful big lie of the CIA director Bill Casey, who said, we'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the U.S. public believes is false. But the more pernicious approach that people take, and I see many people when faced with uncomfortable facts that contradict their delusion, is to negate the existence of objective truth. This phenomenon was first pointed out by the Indian philosopher Nagarjuna. He pointed out that it is easy to negate a particular proposition logically, but then people go on to negate objective fact. With this type of thinking, people are susceptible to believing that 2 plus 2 may sometimes equal 5, not 4. It's easy to simply disregard everything as unknowable. I run into people all the time with this attitude. Still, try walking across the street in traffic not looking both ways. So when you're confronted with uncomfortable facts, who can know? It's too complicated. And no, it's actually pretty simple if you actually look at objective facts. We are living in a world of objective facts. From the point of big philosophical principles, if things are not so clear, But when you're crossing the street, you either look both ways and make sure that you're not going to get hit by a car, or you don't. You just say, oh, it doesn't matter. And then when you get hit, you say, gee, how'd that happen? We're in the state of, gee, how'd that happen? It's all a matter of opinion. We'll never really know because it's in the past and people simply have different perspectives. It's all too complicated. This is a lazy insincere attitude to avoid taking responsibility. Most Americans don't give a second thought to the genocide against the Native Americans or slavery or racist attitude towards African people. They don't notice that the same casual attitude towards these outrages manifests in the millions of victims of U.S. wars of conquest in Hawaii, the Philippines, at the turn of the 19th century. Oh, it was so long ago. We're not like that anymore. It allows them to overlook the mass deaths of civilians in Dresden, Germany, the Tokyo fire bombings, the 2 atomic bombs in Japan in World War II, or the 2 million deaths at Stalingrad. The justification for actual war crimes allowed the perpetrators to rationalize their crimes. Oh, but that happened so long ago. This is the same truth as in the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and all the post-September 11th, 2001 wars, all based on lies, justifying mass murder. Oh, it was just a mistake. Nothing to be done about it now, or worse, they deserved it. And the, if I may say so, cruelest, craziest formulation, it's God's will. The American people are good people, George Bush said. Well, it's largely true, but they're gullible. In a recent Facebook comment, someone naively asked, "So why did Russia invade Ukraine? Where has she been for the past 10 years, indeed the last 30 years of United States broken treaties and promises given to Russia? Or the incessant shelling by a coup government installed by Joe Biden in 2014 of citizens of their own country who had the silly idea that the new regime was illegal and bent on destruction based on their ethnicity. The problem in all this is that, while it looks like nobody has been or will be held accountable eventually, the chickens come home to roost. This is the nihilistic attitude as a psychological defense. So the cure for historical denial and nihilistic thinking is truth and reconciliation. Following the decades-long struggle by Africans to free themselves from racist settler colonialism in South Africa, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission sought to hold those accountable and to acknowledge and apologize for past crimes. The way to do that is to go back and look at the historical record. Did the United States and European colonial states have the courage to look in the mirror? As this article is being written, there are 2 horrific wars going on, both based on lies and exploitation. The British are notorious for cooking up lies and accusations in order to justify themselves, as well as to others, the attacks on various. How many times in history has Russia invaded or attacked England? Answer, 0. How many times have the British attacked Russia? 3 times. The Crimean War of 1853 to 1856. After the 1917 Russian Socialist Revolution, 14 countries invaded Russia to strangle socialism in its crib. And currently, British missiles are hitting Russian targets launched from Ukraine, and the Ukraine's role in fomenting the current war is self-evident. In April 2022, Russia went into Ukraine, worked on a negotiated settlement for Istanbul. This was to stop the bombing of the indigenous Russian-speaking populations in eastern Ukraine. But Boris Johnson insisted that Ukraine keep fighting. So did the U.S., as Senator Lindsey Graham insisted that Ukraine fight Russia to the last Ukrainian. Isn't it nice of these people to be so courageous, to be willing to fight Russia using somebody else's blood? The Ukrainian official, Ermak, inconveniently admitted Johnson's sabotaging peace. British accusations appear to be more psychological projection of their own obsessive hatred of Russia. I'll bet that if Russia ever retaliates, the hapless people will say, "Gee, why did they do that to us?" The question is, when people's psyches are so heavily defended that they either deny the truth or become openly hostile to the question, How can we face the past, face current reality? Worse yet, as the saying goes, if you convince people that absurdities are true, you can convince them to commit atrocities. Instead, consider this story. The people of Kalama asked the Buddha who to trust, who to believe out of all the ascetics, sages, and venerables and holy ones who, like him, passed through their town. They complained that they were confused by the many contradictions they discovered in what they heard. The Kalama Sutta is the Buddha's reply. Do not believe anything based on mere hearsay. Do not believe in traditions merely because they are old and have been handed down for many generations in many places. Do not believe anything on account of rumors or because people talk a great deal about it. Do not believe anything because you are shown the written testimony of some ancient sage. Do not believe in what you fancied, thinking that because it is extraordinary, it must have been inspired by a god or some wonderful being. Do not believe anything merely because presumption is in its favor or because the custom of many years inclines you to think that it is true. Do not believe anything merely on the authority of your teachers and priests. But whatever, after thorough investigation and reflection, you find to agree with reason and experience as conducive to the good and benefit of all, of one and all, and of the world at large, accept only that as true and shape your life in accordance with it. So another statement he made was, do not accept any doctrine from reverence, but first try it as gold is tried by fire. So don't take my word for it. Test it yourself. Question everything. So that is my my talk for today. If you would be so kind, you can make a like or a comment on this on my commentary here. And you can subscribe to my Substack channel, or you can also go to my one of my online stores and buy an information billboard T-shirt, which has messages that might inspire people to question more. Or you could even make a contribution to my efforts through Buy Me a Coffee. So thank you very much for listening. I appreciate your patience as I read through this, and I'll see you soon.